Is it almost over? Are we there yet? How much longer? I've been thinking about the world, about politics, about the rise of AI, about world poverty and hunger and climate change, and I'm just feeling done. Humanity has had a good run, but nothing lasts forever. We must be in the final acts of the story. It's almost over, right? Oh, Jesus, you can come now. We are ready. This is how the Thessalonians were feeling, I suspect. Life as one of the first Christians wasn't easy. Conflicts with religious folks, conflicts with government folks, conflicts with your own church groups. And this isn't some petty bickering. The challenges that early Christians faced were life and death. How frustrating, how anxiety-ridden. I would be so worn out and tired if I was an early Christian. Paul describes the journey as a race, but for these faithful followers, I think it was more like those ninja warrior obstacle courses. They would sure be tired. To this group of believers in Thessalonica, Paul writes a letter to comfort and strengthen them. He says, "As for us, brothers and sisters, when for a short time we were made orphans by being separated from you in person, not in heart, we longed with great eagerness to see you face to face." 1 Thessalonians 2, verse 17. Paul loves this church like they were his own child. He knows that they struggle just as he does, but he urges them to keep doing their best. 4 verse 10. With love, though, comes heartbreak, and some in the struggle have passed away. Paul comforts by reminding them that as Christ died and rose from the grave, so will we. 4 verse 14. And when the Lord returns, at the sound of the trumpet, the dead will rise first, and then we will meet them together in the sky. They are not forgotten. Side note, this is where the idea of the rapture comes from. The rapture is a belief about end times that originates from American Baptist and evangelical communities. They believe that before Jesus returns, the faithful are going to be raptured up into heaven, leaving everyone else behind. Now, the majority of Christian denominations do not believe this, but it has been an influential idea in popular culture. So you might have heard it in TV shows. It comes from this section of 1 Thessalonians, where Paul says, "Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up in the clouds together with them to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will be with the Lord forever." That's 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 17. Paul's point was to comfort the church, assuring them that the Christians who died before Jesus returned are not forgotten. That they will rise from the grave and we will be united again. Paul goes on to give more information about the end times, however. He says that the end will be a surprise, like bumping into a thief as they break into your house. Like verse 2. You'll think that everything is fine and normal in one moment, and then bam, Jesus. So be ready. Don't get drowsy. Keep your spirits up. In this, he's quoting Jesus himself, who also said that he would sneak up to us like a burglar. It's Matthew 24, verses 43 to 44. Why that metaphor, I don't know. But it keeps us on our toes. Although maybe a little too much on our toes. The people of Thessalonica were eagerly waiting for the second coming of Christ. They were checking around corners, punching at the shower curtains, peeking under the beds. Is it Jesus? Is he there? Whenever the neighbor's kid practices their trumpet, Grandma rushes outdoors to look for the horsemen of the apocalypse. Take me, Jesus, I'm ready. What was meant to bring comfort to a people weary from the journey is now having the opposite effect. Paul's intention was to soothe them, to let them know that their loved ones who have passed on will not be forgotten, that we will be reunited. And to a congregation of tired backseat drivers crying, "Are we there yet? How much longer must we wait?" Paul says, soon, just a little further to go. The intention is good. The theology is right. The return of the Lord will be a surprise. Living our life like it might happen tomorrow helps put things in perspective today. However, there are some unintended consequences to this focus on the end times. If the world might end tomorrow, well, why make my bed? Why go to work? Why pay tax? It could lead to nihilism, actually. That's not good. But worse, there's a risk it could damage the way that we treat people. Part of the narrative of end times, a common trope in the apocalyptic literature, is the rise of an evil force which destroys the world and needs to be overcome. For Christians, this is the Antichrist, the embodiment of evil, the personification of Satan. The great adversary will rise up, leading the weak astray, bringing about war and famine and death. This will usher in the return of Christ, who comes like a commander of heavenly armies to save us. With this narrative in mind, it's understandable that people start looking for signs. And the first sign they often look for was the Antichrist. Someone who is craving power, who misleads and exploits others, who brings about corruption and hedonistic greed, who instigates wars and threatens our faith. Which, if you think about it, kind of sounds like literally every despot and dictator ever. Every king in history, every man who has held massive wealth and power. Are they all antichrists? Here's the issue. If we expect that every bad man might be secretly the Antichrist in disguise, then that's going to warp how we treat each other. It's dehumanizing. I know it's hard to accept, but even brutal, terrorizing warlords are still human. Now, I'm not trying to build sympathy for dictators, but if we depict the dictator as the devil, it will have cascading impacts. We'll then view the people who support the dictator as misled fools or worse. They are not people to reason with. There's no hope of changing their hearts. And so we discount them, dismiss them, demonize them. It's no longer just the dictator who's the devil, but now our neighbors and family members, all who are following them. They are demons, all. How do we change hearts and minds with that sort of mentality? How do we preach forgiveness and love? When we give up on their transformation and redemption, well, what hope is there for ours? We get more polarized and more vicious towards our neighbor. On Remembrance Day, we will remember the consequences of this sort of mindset, of what happens when we dehumanize a child of God. Building on generations of anti-Semitism, the Nazis painted Jews as devils. And that act enabled atrocities on a scale the world hadn't seen before. But in fighting Nazism and that evil ideology, we too dehumanized others. I'm trying to make a delicate point here that's really difficult to articulate, so you gotta forgive me if I botch it. The ideology of Nazism is evil, but those who believed it were not devils. The Nazis were still human. This is important for two reasons. First, if we are truly to eradicate their ideology, we need to address the human frailties that gave rise to it. For those of us who believe that men like Saul could be transformed into apostles like Paul, we need to hold out the hope that even a Nazi could be brought to confession and redemption. Throughout modern history, we keep stomping out fires of Nazism whenever it pops up because we haven't cooled the embers that are keeping it alive. I believe this more difficult work requires understanding the other person's humanity and viewing even them as children of God too, who also need salvation. The second reason this is important is because when we paint our enemies as devils, we color ourselves as angels. Oh, it's those people who did such terrible things because they're terrible people. Only evil people can do such evil things. When we think that, we put blinders on ourselves and we fail to see how vulnerable we are to repeating such atrocities. This is how someone who has been oppressed might end up oppressing others, how victims of genocide can become guilty of doing it themselves. Because we demonized our enemy, we thought that we would be immune to their evil. But we're not. We are all just far too human. This is tiring, isn't it? The battle against evil, the fight for justice. We are called to oppress injustice while also trying to show love and compassion in the process, to have a tough skin but a soft heart, to believe in forgiveness when all we want is vengeance. It makes me weary. Oh, that Christ would come soon and justice flow like a mighty river over us. But what about that Antichrist? That still has to happen, right? Seeing where the obsession over his end times talk was leading the Thessalonians, Paul wrote a follow-up, a second letter to the Thessalonians. And that's what we heard in today's reading. Now, Paul doesn't change the theology of what he's saying, but in the second letter, he gives more clarity. He calls the Antichrist the lawless one and says that when the lawless one comes, it will be unmistakable. Quote, "Let no one deceive you in any way," he writes, "for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first and the lawless one is revealed." 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3. He will be revealed. You will see it clearly. He will declare himself God. But almost just as quickly, the lawless one is destroyed by Christ, by the breath of Christ's mouth, apparently. And that's not meant to be as insulting as it sounds. The point is, you're not going to miss it. So stop eyeing your neighbor suspiciously. Stop trying to guess who the devil is in disguise. None of that is helpful. For us today, it means not getting sucked into the polarizing vortexes of cable news and social media. One news channel says that this person is the end of democracy, and another news channel says that that person is going to destroy our country. They point at this leader or that as the embodiment of all evil. The language is so extreme that it causes us to think in very black and white ways, painting our opponents as devils. Now, there are a lot of bad actors out there in our world today, true, but none of them are the Antichrist. Not yet. Instead of obsessing over the Antichrist and what might come in the future, let's turn our attention to God and give thanks for what we have now. Thanks for the peace we have today. Thanks for the food on our tables. Thanks for whatever is to come. We know where we've been. We know who walks with us. We know where our help and salvation lies. And so, rather than anxiously scanning the horizon for signs of the end, we can lift our eyes to the present. Find joy in where we are now. See Christ already work in the kindness we offer, in the mercy we receive, in the hope that refuses to die even when the journey feels, so long. Amen.